Good morning, everyone. I would like first to thank the organizers of this conference for giving me the floor and the opportunity to share with you some historical and ethical reflections about the challenge of the digital era. I will start with Boëtius, the Christian Roman statesman and philosopher of the 5th century, often styled the last of the Romans, that gave us a definition of person, a notion that was crucial in theology and became one of the most important conceptual legacies that translated into political and legal frameworks allow us to build up our advanced societies and political systems. A person, wrote Boëtius, is an individual substance in rational nature. The person is the most perfect thing in all of nature that possesses great dignity, wrote Thomas Aquinas, and therefore demands to be recognized and valued accordingly. A dignity derived not from any legal or political document, but according to our Christian tradition, from being created as image of God and called to transcendence beyond his own earthly experience. I am aware that today any consideration or appeal to God in the political context may seem provocative, but in my view there is no civilization without religion or anything else that performs a similar function. If we talk about our own civilization and tradition, we cannot ignore, at least in explanatory terms, the way in which the West has believed and millions of its citizens still believe in the Christian God, and how the incarnation of the second person of the Holy Trinity, his life and redemption, was the key to the moral and spiritual advancement of all humanity, and at all times continues to be not only a reliable guide, but also a hallmark of a universal civilization embodied in different cultures. The influence of Christianity, and in particular Christian theology, in the shaping of human rights, protection of human dignity, is undoubtful. The notion of subjective right basis for our current legal systems, including human rights, is the outcome of the Middle Age disputes between two Catholic religious orders, Franciscans and Dominicans. The first defending the idea of total poverty, meaning that a person can live without being owner of anything, while Dominicans defended the opposite, as eating an apple means, they say, that you have power over it, and therefore you are the owner. One of the most astonishing and splendorous moments in human history took place in Spain in 1512, when the Spanish king of Aragon, Ferdinand the Catholic, convoked a council of theologians and jurists to set up the legal rules that created the first human rights precedent, the so-called laws of Burgos, including the treatment of Indians in America as free men with property rights and with several social rights to protect them. Furthermore, the controversies of Valladolid in 1550-51, convoked by the Emperor Charles I of Spain and V of Germany, limited the power of authorities in the Spanish America. The School of Salamanca, prominent in several areas, including the basis for modern economy, or the prominent case of the Catholic Dominican priest Francisco de Vitoria, founder of international law, shows how fruitful Christian reflection was. The intrinsic value of the person and moral significance of truth, good, justice, freedom, and responsibility that for centuries were clear and accepted as common ground in Christianity have been seriously eroded by numerous ideologies guided by man's desire to dominate other men and by the eternal temptation to be like God and replace him. Even the notion of human dignity is put into question today. In the Brussels political landscape, I have heard the idea expressed by some radical ideologies that human dignity is a right-wing concept. I've heard that. Anything that sounds Christian or is linked to Christianity is for them simply rejectable. However, to put aside our classical theological and philosophical tradition that could allow us to discover our own civilization and greatness, and to revive it would be a deep mistake. Persons, not individuals, and human dignity in the context of common good, not of public or state interest, are core principles in our civilization. Let me tell you an anecdote. Some years ago, I was speaking with a Catholic US military bishop who had been deployed in Iraq. He told me the story of Iraqi Muslim soldiers trying to understand why US soldiers were risking their lives to rescue a simple, wounded soldier. To them, it made no military sense. In numerical terms, it certainly makes no sense. But it does make sense in light of the concept of the absolute dignity of each person held by Christianity. In 1891, Pope Leo XIII wrote his famous encyclical Rerum Novarum, whose first words were the spirit of revolutionary change, and started what is called the social doctrine of the Catholic Church in the context of the Industrial Revolution. At that time, it was the social question of capital and labor, a right understanding of property and common good, and the need to stop abuses against workers and their families. Today's digital revolution is not only social, but deeply anthropological. For the first time in history, humanity is witnessing the blurring of the boundaries between reality and simulation. It is becoming more and more difficult to recognize what is true in an ocean of contradictory, massive information. Human biology and technology are getting closer to the extent that transhumanism is not anymore a science fiction issue. Moreover, the distinction between person and machine has been put into question by artificial intelligence. Machines, no matter how sophisticated they are, remain artifacts. They cannot love, suffer, or experience moral responsibility. To describe them as anxious or stressed, as some AI experiments have suggested, is to project human categories into mechanical outputs. The challenge is not simply how AI might act ethically, but how humans might ethically treat AI. If society is willing to ascribe dignity to a machine. The theological and philosophical stakes are high. Is AI a he or a it? An agent, like Noah Harari defends, or an instrument, as Pope Francis and Pope Leo XIV suggest? Or maybe, as some others say, a tertium quid. A real agent is not merely an autonomous entity, but a free and responsible one that is accountable for his decisions and actions. If an AI is a real agent as a human being, could that synthetic entity ever claim, for example, the right to consensus objection against a mandate of a user, or even religious rights? Should an AI enjoy the right to marry a human being or another AI? Or even further, would it have the right to life, to exist, and then we won't be entitled to disconnect it? If it has conscience, could AI become criminally responsible, for example, for a hate crime or planning a genocide? Such questions, though speculative, illuminate the enormity of what is at stake. Although it may sound strange if one takes seriously the assertion that AI is a moral agent, it's not impossible to imagine a claim for the attribution of certain rights associated with such a status, including non-discrimination. Interestingly, to the question, can AI pray in theological terms, ChatGPT responded that, and I quote, artificial intelligence may generate the form of prayer, words, gestures, even liturgical text, but it cannot pray in the theological sense. Prayer is the conscious turning of mind and heart to God. This is ChatGPT, it's not me. An act of faith and will that presupposes interiority and freedom. An AI lacks soul, intention, and faith. It can imitate devotion, but it cannot itself be a subject of prayer. This is the end of the quotation, the ChatGPT quotation. I think that this is an accurate response. Despite its sophistication, AI remains nothing more than a highly elaborated tool, a statistical machine devoid of genuine consciousness. The use of the word intelligence applied to the system is misleading. In its original meaning in Czech language, the word robot derives from the Czech word robota, that is also used in other Slavic languages, like, for example, Russian. Robota means work. Well, in this original meaning, it means forced labor as done by serfs, and it was used in 1921 by a very famous intellectual, Czech intellectual Kabex, in a play called RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots. One of the play's characters, Mr. Rossum, whose name translated into English signifies Mr. Intellectual or Mr. Brain, is a typical representative of a scientific materialism. Kabeck was warning that the product of the human brain has escaped the control of human hands. We are witnessing a similar situation nowadays of potential uncontrolled machines and systems that, instead of being at the service of humanity, could be at the service of few who will exploit them to their own benefit. Some argue that we are still in the first phase of AI and predict that there will be a time where the so-called general AI or artificial general intelligence, AGI, will perform virtually any intellectual task that a human can, including self-learning. This is a mere hypothesis whose possibility many others deny. But even if AGI becomes a reality, it will be a different reality than a human person. The terms intelligence, decision, intention, or action applied to AI have concrete mathematical meanings, but not moral sense in the way that are attributed to human beings. Intelligence, says the Vatican document Nova et Antiqua, published in January this year, is not, according to this document, intelligence is not only the ability to perform specific tasks, but the openness to the ultimate questions of life and the capacity to contemplate the truth, good, and beauty beyond any utilitarian purpose. While AI technologies have great potential to contribute to human flourishing and the common good, it could be a mistake to describe those programs as intelligence in the same way as humans are. AI is a tool, not a soul. This was the headline of a recent article published in the Wall Street Journal. Human beings are creatures of God. AI are a product of human genius. I'm nearly at the end of my presentation. Probably we will have to fine-tune our basic moral notions such as conscience, intention, freedom, and responsibility, but the uniqueness of human beings as persons and the moral dimension should be preserved. AI can be autonomous, but will never be a moral agent with inherent freedom. It can have awareness, but will never be a moral agent with that voice of God inside each of us. At a time where truth has been relativized and reduced to a social construct based on naked consensus, where human will and desires are the source of political and legal frameworks, to rediscover the human nature as moral instance and virtues as guidance for our actions will allow us to revert the dangerous trend reinforced by ideologies that disregard both reality and common sense. The notion of common good as the good of all and everyone in all dimensions, including the spiritual one, should be a guiding force in the digital era, as it is the principle of subsidiarity in the respect of fundamental rights that risk erosion, such as religious freedom, free expression, parental rights, and property rights. Democracy, said Böckenförde, a very famous German jurist and member of the Federal Constitutional Court, he said, democracy is founded on principles that it itself is unable to guarantee. While the president of democracy in ancient Athens, the first historical president for parliamentarism, took place in the 12th century in the Spanish kingdom of Leon, in the context of the medieval Christianity, so reviled by modernity. Leon is on the way of Santiago, a pilgrimage route. And some authors claim that it was a pilgrim who traveled to Santiago at that time, who on his return to his country, England, imported the model of the Spanish Kingdom of Leon parliamentarian system. Christianity has always been a fertile ground for advanced knowledge, and contrary to current fake narratives, it has endless potential to keep on playing its role as guidance in the digital era. The Christian tradition of ethical and social reflection is a moral compass to discern the path we should take in these times. Digital systems, including AI, are neither angels nor demons. We must resist the seduction of digital and algorithmic authority and reaffirm the primacy of the human dignity, moral responsibility, and transcendent truth. As Lopa de Mantaras, an AI leading scholar, wisely cautioned, let us not overestimate machines, but above all, let us not underestimate what it means to be human. Thank you.